There was nothing remarkable about Pinebrook, a sleepy town tucked between two faded highways and forgotten forests. That was precisely why the night shift job at Melvin's Market felt safe enough to take. $22 an hour, no experience needed, and no questions asked. For someone like me, with no degree and bills stacking faster than shelves, it was a lifeline. My name is Caleb, and this is not just another job story. This is about the night shift that nearly took my life. From the moment I walked into that fluorescent-lit store, things were wrong. The dust in the air shimmered like glass. The security cameras followed too smoothly. The employees smiled too long. Then came the list. A single sheet of paper, folded neatly and handed to me by a man who would not stop staring. He told me one thing with dead certainty. If you break the rules, it will know. And I believed him. My hands had not stopped shaking in weeks. Rent was late again. The final notice fluttered on my apartment door like a dare I refused to answer. My last job had dried up along with the diner it belonged to, and every application I sent out returned silence or rejection. So when I saw the listing for a night shift stalker at Melvin's Market, I applied before finishing the last line. Pinebrook had only one grocery store, and Melvin's was it. It sat crooked near the edge of town, where fog settled like a warning and the lot was always half-lit. I had passed it every day for years but never been inside. Still, the pay was real and the hours were perfect. I could still search for a better future in the daylight while restocking shelves in the silence of night. The man who interviewed me was pale and soft-spoken, wearing a red apron over a pressed white shirt. He introduced himself as Mr. Cowley, the store supervisor, and barely looked at my resume before nodding once. "You start tonight," he said. "Be here by 9:15 p.m. Read the rules. Do not forget them." He did not explain further. As I left the office, something unsettled me. The hallway lights hummed slightly off-key. The freezer door creaked open without anyone near it. A cart moved on its own, just a few inches. Not enough to be obvious. Just enough to be noticed. When I returned that evening, Pinebrook was already asleep. The streets were silent, the air thick and cold despite the season. The sky was cloudless, yet no stars were visible. Melvin's Market glowed dull yellow from its sign, buzzing faintly as I parked. I stepped into the store at 9:11 p.m. No customers. No music. Just aisle after aisle of waiting shadows. Mr. Cowley met me at the door, holding a folded paper in one hand and a set of keys in the other. His voice did not waver. "Read it once. Read it twice. Follow it always." He handed me the paper and disappeared down a back hallway without another word. I unfolded the list. There were exactly 7 rules. Rule 1. Never use the intercom. If you hear it activate on its own, hide under the produce table until the red light above aisle 3 turns off. Rule 2. Do not enter aisle 6 between 10:20 p.m. and 10:40 p.m. even if you hear footsteps. Rule 3. If the power flickers more than twice in 1 minute, go directly to the break room and lock the door. Remain silent until the lights stabilize. Rule 4. You may see a woman in a gray sweater standing at the seafood section. Do not speak to her. Do not look at her reflection in the glass. Rule 5. The clock behind the bakery always shows the correct time. Trust no other clocks in the building. Rule 6. If an item rolls across the floor, let it finish. Do not pick it up even if it stops at your feet. Rule 7. If a second version of yourself appears, it will be wearing the wrong name tag. Do not let it touch you. The final line was handwritten in red ink. If you break a rule, you will have seconds to react. The store will not forgive you twice. The clock behind the bakery read 9:22 p.m. The store was dead silent except for the low hum of the overhead lights. I could hear the soft, uneven clicking of my shoes against the linoleum as I moved past the checkout lanes. Their digital displays were dim, and one of the belts was slowly inching forward as if carrying invisible groceries. I ignored it. The air inside was dry, not cold exactly, but stale. The kind of atmosphere where sound carried too far and light never reached the corners. I kept my head down, walking past the aisles slowly. The paper with the rules stayed in my pocket, but I had already memorized them. Mr. Cowley had disappeared again. I had not seen another human since walking in. The back room was empty. A mop leaned against the wall. The staff lockers were labeled with names I did not recognize. One had scratch marks across the door, 3 long grooves as if something had clawed through the metal but failed to open it. Another hung open, entirely empty except for a single right shoe. I opened the locker assigned to me, Caleb etched in black marker, and found a red apron hanging neatly inside, still pressed and folded. By 9:30 p.m., I was in aisle 2, restocking canned vegetables and trying not to look at the security mirrors. They were too convex, too distorted, and the movement in them did not always match mine. My cart squeaked softly as I rolled it along. The rhythm helped calm my nerves. Then, just as I reached the end of the aisle, I heard the first sound of the night. Click. Something small and hard hit the floor behind me. I turned slowly. There was a can of green beans, sitting perfectly upright in the middle of the aisle. It had not been there seconds earlier. I stared at it, heart ticking faster. Rule 6 came back to me instantly. If an item rolls across the floor, let it finish. Do not pick it up even if it stops at your feet. It had not rolled, at least not that I saw. But I backed away anyway, leaving the can where it was. As I turned the corner into aisle 3, I heard the softest whir of static from above me. I looked up. The red light above the intercom was glowing. This, the speaker crackled. A low tone buzzed through it, like someone testing a mic too close to their mouth. Then a soft voice spoke, not clearly, not fully, just fragments. Watching aisle 6, do not. My blood turned to ice. Rule 1. If you hear the intercom activate on its own, hide under the produce table until the red light above aisle 3 turns off. I did not wait. I ran, no hesitation, through the bakery section and ducked under the produce table near the front of the store. The space was cramped, the smell of rotten bananas thick beneath it. My knees pressed to the floor, breath shallow and ragged. I clutched the wooden beam above me and stared through the gaps between the boxes of apples and pears. The intercom crackled again. A soft laugh echoed through the speaker. Then silence. The red light continued to glow. I waited. 1 minute passed. Then 2. On the 3rd minute, it blinked once, twice, and then faded out. I stayed under the table for another full minute before crawling out. My legs were numb. My shirt clung to my back with sweat. I walked slowly back to aisle 2, retrieved my cart, and resumed stocking. The rest of that hour passed without incident. But I no longer trusted the silence. At 10:15 p.m., I entered the back storage area to retrieve the next batch of boxed goods. The loading bay light flickered, casting long, stuttering shadows across the room. I kept my focus ahead, trying not to think about the claw marks on the floor or the odd wet footprints leading to the freezer door. They were barefoot. The cooler unit groaned behind me, its interior humming louder than necessary. I moved faster. When I returned to the store floor, the bakery clock read 10:23 p.m. I froze. Aisle 6 was directly ahead of me, and someone was standing at the far end. A woman, facing away, unmoving. She wore a gray sweater, long sleeves covering her wrists, and her black hair hung loosely down her back. Her posture was too straight, rigid. She had not been there before. I stepped to the side, choosing to go around aisle 7 instead. My hands trembled as I gripped the box tighter. I tried not to look, but curiosity burned in the corners of my vision. Halfway past the aisle, I risked a glance. She had not moved, but her reflection had. The glass panels on the refrigerated meat section reflected her face. At least, they should have. What I saw was something else. Something smiling too wide, with empty eyes and teeth that never ended. I dropped the box. The sound was loud, louder than it should have been. It echoed unnaturally through the store. I backed away from the reflection, refusing to look at her actual form. Rule 4, do not speak to her. Do not look at her reflection. I shut my eyes tightly and counted slowly to 10. My breath came fast and sharp. When I opened them again, she was gone. Not vanished. Not disappeared. She had simply stepped around the end of the aisle and walked out of view. I stayed behind the shelf for a full 5 minutes before returning to work. By 10:40 p.m., I had made it back to the storage room, using the long route through aisle 9 to avoid going anywhere near aisle 6. My heart had only just begun to calm when I noticed something that made it start racing all over again. The power had flickered. It lasted less than a second, but it made every fluorescent light in the building blink at the same time. The shadows snapped across the ceiling like spiderwebs. The air shifted slightly, like the oxygen had been pulled from the room for just a blink. I stood frozen, staring at the hanging light bulb above the rear storage shelf. Then, 30 seconds later, it flickered again. Twice now. In under a minute. I remembered Rule 3. If the power flickers more than twice in 1 minute, go directly to the break room and lock the door. Remain silent until the lights stabilize. I looked up again. My watch ticked louder than it should. It felt like my hearing had sharpened, or everything else had gone quiet. Then the third flicker hit. Not a blink this time, but a seizure. The lights pulsed on and off rapidly. The overhead buzz became a stuttered, mechanical scream. Shadows danced violently on the walls, and I felt something very real move behind me. I sprinted. The break room door was across the hall behind the employee bathrooms. My legs nearly gave out from under me as I threw open the door, slammed it shut, and twisted the lock so hard it nearly snapped off in my hand. Silence. Pitch black. The break room had no windows, only a single red exit sign above the back door and a vending machine that made a soft clicking sound in the dark. I backed into the far corner and slid to the floor. My breaths came out in short, sharp gasps. My throat felt dry, like I had been swallowing gravel. I could hear something outside. Footsteps. But not normal ones. They were staggered, mismatched, wet. Splat. Splat. It moved slowly, like it had nowhere to be, and it wanted me to know that. My back pressed to the wall. I covered my mouth with both hands. A single breath might give me away. A minute passed. Then 3. Then the footsteps stopped directly in front of the break room door. I heard the doorknob turn. Twice. Softly. Patiently. The lock rattled just slightly, as if whatever was out there was not in a hurry. I looked to the vending machine, hoping it would stay silent. My reflection in its black glass screen looked like someone else entirely, sweaty, wild-eyed, face pale as paper. The doorknob turned again, and then it stopped. The lights snapped back on with a loud hum, the flicker gone. The exit sign above the door stabilized. I waited. 10 more seconds. Nothing. I unlocked the door and peeked out. The hallway was empty, but the floor was smeared with dark streaks of water, or something thicker, trailing from the employee bathroom all the way back toward aisle 6. I did not follow it. By the time I returned to the floor, it was nearly midnight. The bakery clock read 11:52 p.m. I was restocking the dry goods shelf near the pet food aisle when I noticed something bizarre. My cart was no longer where I had left it. I was certain I had parked it in aisle 4. But now it sat perfectly centered at the end of aisle 5, like someone had placed it there deliberately. I approached cautiously. The moment I turned the corner, I froze. There was someone standing beside it. He wore the same red apron, the same shoes, the same name tag, except my name is spelled Thalibi. His read Kalibi. He looked up. His face was identical to mine, but wrong. The skin was too smooth, the eyes slightly too large, and the smile, God, that smile, was carved like it had been forced onto his face. My double stood in silence, staring at me. Then, slowly, he raised one hand and beckoned. Just one curl of the fingers. Rule 7 screamed in my mind. If a second version of yourself appears, it will be wearing the wrong name tag. Do not let it touch you. He took a step forward. I backed away. Another step. Then another. I turned and ran. The overhead lights dimmed for a moment, then flashed brighter. The shelving units cast massive shadows as I sprinted past them. I heard the duplicate running behind me. His footsteps louder than mine, more chaotic, like he had more limbs than he should. I darted into aisle 9 and grabbed the fire extinguisher mounted near the end cap. I turned, raised it, ready to swing. But he was gone. The aisle was empty. My heart hammered in my chest. I backed against the shelf of pancake syrup, breathing hard, extinguisher gripped tight. Something moved on the top shelf. The can tumbled down, bounced once, and rolled to a stop against my shoe. I dropped the extinguisher. The rule: if an item rolls across the floor, let it finish. Do not pick it up. I stared at it. A dented can of peaches, rolling in from nowhere. The lights buzzed again, and the air temperature dropped so quickly I saw my breath. Then I heard it. The sound of whispering. Not words, just shapes of them. And laughter. My own laughter, but twisted and distant, like it was bouncing back from deep inside a cave. I left the can and ran. Back through the bakery, past the dairy cooler, and straight into aisle 6. My mistake. The moment my foot crossed the threshold, I knew. It was too quiet here. The lights above flickered, just once. The shelves looked too tall. The walls too far away. Like the aisle had become a tunnel, stretching deeper than the building could possibly allow. And at the far end, she was waiting. The woman in the gray sweater. Only now she was facing me. I could not see her face clearly. It was blurry, as if smudged by water. Her eyes were dark hollows, and her mouth moved like she was speaking, but no sound emerged. Then her head twitched. Twice. Her feet did not move, but she was suddenly 10 feet closer. And then closer again. I turned to run, but the aisle no longer had ends. Only shelves. Only darkness. I pressed my back against the cereal display, hyperventilating. The air smelled like old perfume and copper. Her hands rose slowly. She had no fingers, just smooth, rounded ends like sealed wax. I closed my eyes. Do not look at her. Do not speak. Do not break the rules. A sound grew in the back of my mind. Not quite a voice. Not quite a scream. Just pressure. And then, a hand touched my shoulder. I spun around, swinging blindly. But no one was there. The aisle was normal again. The clock above the bakery read 12:17 a.m. The lights were back to full brightness. And I was alone. The store did not feel like a store anymore. The shelves stretched in unnatural ways. The lights pulsed subtly, almost like breathing. I stopped checking the time because I no longer trusted any clock except the one above the bakery. Even then, I began to wonder who or what had placed it there. I made my way to the dairy section to finish my restock, but the cooler door was wide open. A thick mist rolled out from the inside, as if the refrigeration system had been replaced with fog machines. I stepped closer and immediately regretted it. Inside the cooler stood a man, or something that wore a man's shape. He was tall, far too tall to fit without hunching, yet his neck remained unnaturally straight. His clothes were identical to mine. The red apron, the black name tag. His eyes were closed. His hands hung at his sides. He said nothing, but something about his presence screamed louder than words ever could. I should have walked away. I should have followed my instincts and run. But I could not move. His chest rose once, a slow inhale that seemed to draw the oxygen from the entire store. Then his eyes snapped open. There were no pupils, no irises, only mirrors. In each eye, I saw reflections of myself. But they were not me. One of them was smiling. The other was crying blood. I turned and fled, heart slamming into my ribs. The sliding doors at the front of the store remained sealed shut, just as Mr. Cowley had promised. The alarm system's red light blinked slowly above the exit. I slammed a hand against the glass. It was ice cold. The man from the cooler had not followed. But something else had. I heard my own name whispered from the intercom system. Caleb. The voice was childlike. So, wrong. Caleb, you left it open? Then silence. I backed away from the exit and ran to the break room again. It had become my only sanctuary. But when I reached the break room door, it was already open. And someone was sitting at the table inside. It was a man in his mid-30s. Bald, round-faced, wearing a red apron identical to mine. He was staring at a piece of paper in his hands, lips moving silently. I stepped closer. "Hello?" I asked. He did not look up. His mouth kept moving. "Sir? Are you all right?" He slowly turned toward me. His eyes were missing. 2 empty sockets stared in my direction, the skin around them sewn shut by something that did not know how to use a needle. "Too late," he said. "Too late for me. Too late for you." Then he blinked. and I realized that the stitches were on the inside of his eyelids. He reached out, trying to hand me the paper. I took it without thinking. It was a second copy of the rules. But every rule was now scratched out, except one. There are no rules after 2 a.m. The man at the table began to laugh. Not hysterically. Softly. Almost sadly. And then he dissolved. Not vanished, dissolved. His form crumbled into gray dust that floated upward, passing through the vents in the ceiling like smoke. The paper in my hands blackened and fell apart. I stood alone in the break room, heart cold, throat burning. The clock said it was 1:47 a.m. 13 minutes until the rules stopped applying. I had never felt more afraid. The moment the bakery clock struck 2 a.m., everything changed. The lights went out. Not in flickers. Not in pulses. Complete darkness. The silence that followed was not empty. It was too full. I could hear everything. The whir of air vents, the shift of shelving metal, the hum of fridges. And breathing. So much breathing. None of it mine. I reached for my flashlight, hands trembling so hard I dropped it. When I finally managed to click it on, the beam was weaker than it should have been. It illuminated only a few feet in front of me, casting long shadows across the tiles. Then I saw them. Not one. Not two. 6 figures. All identical to me. All wearing my face. They stood in various parts of the store, one at the end of aisle 3, another behind the deli counter, one crouched on top of the checkout conveyor. They did not move. They watched. And they smiled. I backed into the cleaning closet and slammed the door. Inside, the light bulb flickered, but held. The mop bucket smelled of bleach and something older. I pressed my back against the door, struggling to breathe. The rules were gone. The paper had said so. There was nothing left to follow. I was on my own. Then I heard a noise from the closet shelf above me. A slow dragging sound. Like claws over cardboard. I turned the flashlight upward and saw a face staring down at me. But it was not mine. It was the face of Mr. Cowley. Except his mouth had been sewn shut. And from it, dozens of strings extended downward, attached to invisible points around the closet. Like he had become the puppet of something far worse. His eyes blinked, once, before the strings pulled him upward through the ceiling. Gone. Just gone. I pushed the door open and ran. The store had changed. Walls were in the wrong place. Aisles looped impossibly. The bakery was where the produce section used to be. The coolers buzzed louder than jet engines. Something had broken inside this place. Or something had broken in. I ran until my legs burned. And I ended up in aisle 6 again. Of course I did. There, on the ground, was a child. A boy. Curled into a ball, crying softly. "Help me," he whispered. I backed away. The rules were gone. But I still remembered them. Never interact with children. Even now, when everything else had been erased, that one still rang true. "Please," he said again, looking up. His face was shifting. Eyes changing color. Hair changing length. He became a little girl. Then a teenager. Then a man with empty eyes. Then me. And still he cried. I ran to the bakery and grabbed a rolling rack to block the aisle. I did not look back. I thought I had seen everything this place could throw at me. The identical doubles. The dissolving man. The faceless woman in the sweater. The boy who wore every face but his own. But the worst was still waiting. And it was waiting behind the door that did not exist yesterday. It was in the back hallway, past the manager's office. I had walked by that stretch of wall more than a dozen times that night alone. I knew for certain that there had never been a door there. But now, one stood in front of me. It was old and wooden, painted black. The doorknob was cast iron and rusted over. There was no sign, no warning. Just a slight hum coming from behind it. A vibration in the air like a low chord being held on an organ. I told myself to walk away. I told myself there was no rule about a basement door, and maybe that meant I should ignore it altogether. But something pulled me toward it. A presence. A feeling. Not temptation, command. I opened it. The door creaked slowly, revealing a staircase that spiraled downward into darkness. The smell was immediate, wet stone, iron, and decay. I descended carefully, my flashlight flickering at every step. The walls were lined with tiles like the kind found in old public bathrooms. Chipped, yellowed, never clean. The staircase ended in a narrow hallway. The walls dripped condensation, and the ceiling was so low I had to crouch to continue. The buzzing in the air got louder. The light revealed hundreds of handprints along the walls, small, large, smeared. Some made with dirt, others with something far darker. Then the hallway widened, and I stepped into what looked like a chapel. A chapel beneath a grocery store. The floor was made of black marble, slick and veined with silver cracks. Candles burned along the walls, but they gave off no heat. Their flames flickered sideways, against the pull of gravity. In the center stood a stone altar. And behind it, Mr. Cowley. But not the man I had met. This version was taller. His limbs were too thin, his skin stretched tightly over his face like wax paper. His eyes glowed faintly red, and his voice, when he spoke, came from beneath the floor. "You broke the order," he said. "You followed rules. But you also disobeyed them." I took a step back. His shadow did not move. "It is not just a store," he said. "This place is a filter, a threshold. The rules are not to protect you from what is in here. They are to protect what is out there from becoming part of you." I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. "Do you know why the job ad said, 'No experience necessary'?" he asked. He stepped forward now, one long leg after another, movement unnatural and floating. Because experience means fear. And fear makes it harder for us to get inside. "Inside what?" I finally asked. He smiled. "Inside you." I turned to run, but the door was gone. Only darkness remained. "Tonight was a test," he said. "And you passed just enough to become part of the next cycle." Suddenly, my arms felt heavy. My legs refused to move. I looked down and saw that my skin was graying. My hands were fading at the edges, becoming translucent. "No," I whispered. "You will be the new trainer," he said. "You will hand out the rules." "I will not." "You already are." The world blinked, and I was standing at the front of the store. The morning sun was rising behind the foggy glass. A young man, no older than 19, stood in front of me, holding a resume in one hand and a hopeful smile on his face. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper. My hands moved without permission as I handed it to him. "The rules. Read them," I said. My voice was mine, but hollow. "Follow them. Do not break them." He looked confused. I remembered that feeling. Then he nodded, and the store opened its arms once again. The young man's eyes flickered over the paper in my hand. Those carefully folded, ink-stained rules that once felt like salvation, now a cage. He looked up at me, a mixture of hope and fear, the same mixture I once had. I swallowed hard. The weight of the basement door's command pressed on my chest, but deeper still was a strange numbness that had settled inside me, part resignation, part dread. I took a breath. "You'll learn," I said quietly, my voice almost a whisper. "You'll learn what to look for, what to avoid. The rules aren't just guidelines. They're armor." His nod was small, tentative. The store's automatic doors slid open, and the early morning light spilled inside, a pale promise of a new day. But it was a lie, because outside, the world was already shifting. I stayed behind the counter longer than usual, watching him fade into the aisles, blending into the shadows between the fluorescent lights. The store's quiet hum, the soft buzz of refrigerators, the faint rustle of plastic bags, felt wrong now, like the hollow echo inside a tomb. And then I noticed it. The first cracks. At first, they were almost imperceptible. A flicker in the glass of the freezer doors, like a ripple distorting an image beneath water. A shadow that paused just a moment too long near the bakery, where no one else stood. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed louder, their buzzing turning into a low drone, a sound that made my teeth ache. Then the walls began to warp. The aisles stretched impossibly long, products rearranged themselves, shifting like tides. I blinked, but the change didn't stop. The store was alive. No, it was becoming something else. A gateway. I tried to warn the young man, but his gaze was distant. The rules I handed him felt like paper cutouts against the storm that was rising. And then the air cracked. A voice, not Cowley's this time, but something older, deeper, and colder, echoed through the store, seeping through the walls and shelves. The threshold breaks. The cycle resets. The filter weakens. I could feel it in my bones. This place wasn't just a trap anymore. It was a breach. The things we feared were leaking through, those faceless figures, the dissolving man, the doubles. They spilled into the world outside, creeping into city streets, homes, lives. I saw a woman on the news later that day, her face blank, her eyes void, standing in the middle of a crowded subway platform. No one stopped her. No one noticed. The store was no longer the boundary. It was the starting point. I sat in the dim break room, the rules scattered around me like brittle leaves. The paper had begun to crumble, and with it, my sense of control. But then I thought of something, the basement door. The door that appeared and vanished. The door that had made me the trainer. What if that door was not just an entrance or an exit? What if it was a choice? I rose and walked to where the door had been. Past the manager's office, down the cold hallway. The wall was solid again. No door. But the hum was back. So persistent. Calling. I pressed my palm to the wall. The cold seeped into my skin, but I held on. I don't want to be part of this anymore, I whispered. And the wall rippled. The door formed again. Black, rusted, ominous. This time, I did not hesitate. I opened the door and descended. The chapel was gone. In its place was a vast room, endless and empty. The shadows from the candles flickered here, alive and watching. And Cowley, no longer thin and ghostly, but solid, more human. Why? I asked, voice cracking. Why this cycle? Why trap us in fear and rules? He looked at me with hollow eyes. To contain the darkness. To keep the world safe. But also to feed it. Feed it. I echoed. Yes. Fear, obedience, broken promises, they fuel the filter. And the filter keeps the darkness balanced. My skin crawled. So, we're not just victims. No. You're participants. He gestured to the vast room, and shapes began to emerge. Countless others like me, others like the young man, caught in cycles, some desperate, some resigned. The darkness wasn't a villain. It was a mirror. A reflection of human weakness and strength intertwined. I looked down at my hands, still fading, still translucent. But there must be another way, I said, defiance rising. Cowley smiled, a flicker of something almost like pity. There is always a choice. He stepped aside. And I saw it, another door, this one white, glowing faintly. Step through, he said. But no, beyond that door lies uncertainty. Freedom comes with sacrifice. I hesitated, heart pounding. Behind me, the shadows whispered. The rules rustled in my pocket. The young man's hopeful face flickered in my mind. I stepped forward. The light enveloped me. I awoke on the sidewalk outside the store. The morning sun was warm. No hum, no door. Just the world. Real and raw. I looked down. My hands were solid. The rules were gone. But so was the certainty. As I walked away, I realized the true violation wasn't breaking rules or following them blindly. It was surrendering to the fear that keeps us trapped. Inside the store, inside the cycle, inside ourselves. Freedom wasn't a set of rules handed down or a door forced open. It was choosing to face the darkness without becoming it. The store stood silent behind me, its doors closed for now. But somewhere, deep inside its walls, I knew the cycle would start again. Because fear is never truly gone. But hope? Hope can always break through.